Imagine a quiet morning when a man mercilessly tightens the straps, fastening his little son to the tracks to be crushed by an oncoming train. What happens next? The light of the autumn morning was just beginning to paint the horizon as a man slowly walked along an abandoned path towards the old railway tracks. His steps were heavy, as if he carried not only grief but also an additional burden of darkness and hatred. In one hand he held straps, while with the other he pushed a wheelchair with a frail 5-year-old boy. The child looked hopelessly pale, his eyes swollen from tears, and his body was helplessly pressed against the seat. His jacket was unbuttoned, and the cold of the morning seeped to his bones. The man, wearing an expensive coat and silk scarf, showed his indifference, while his costly watch in the morning light only highlighted his cold-heartedness. The man was silent, occasionally casting a glance at the boy, devoid of compassion and doubt, filled only with hatred and icy coldness. "You shouldn't have been born," he hoarsely said, stopping at the tracks. "You ruined everything, and now you will disappear." He began to secure the wheelchair to the tracks with straps. The boy tried to break free, his hands trembling, but his muscles betrayed him. He was choking on sobs, but no sound brought him any feeling of salvation. The only thing he could utter was, "Dad, please." The man said nothing, just tightened the last strap, brushed off the dust from his coat, and retreated into the shadows of the forest to observe. The roar of the approaching train grew louder. The boy was left alone. At that same hour, an eerie silence hung over the village. People began to open shutters, go out into the yards, feed chickens, and pour their first cups of hot coffee. Yet something unusual was happening in the stable on the outskirts. Storm, a powerful and graceful horse, began to grow increasingly agitated. She pawed the ground, shook her head, snorted, and neighed, sensing something no one else could hear. "What's bothering her?" the old caretaker involuntarily asked, cautiously approaching. "Calm down, girl. Everything will be all right." But Storm didn't comply. In her mind, an image flashed like lightning. The boy, the very one she had known since the beginning of days, had once hugged her neck and whispered, "You are my only friend." This bond was deeper than mere friendship. They were connected by soul. Suddenly, Storm darted back, rose on her hind legs, and with a surge of force overcame the fence. The caretaker cried out but didn't manage to grab the lead. The horse, like lightning, raced down the narrow path, driven by intuition. She dashed through forests, fields, along winding trails, ignoring pain and fatigue. Every second counted, a distant rumble echoed in her chest. The rhythm of the train, the noise of impending disaster which she felt and ran from, only faster. No one could stop her at that moment. Neither humans nor fear, because ahead lay the cold steel tracks and the one she had to save. The roar grew closer. The ground shook, metallic clatter spread through the rails like a warning. There were only a few minutes left. The boy no longer felt his body. Tears had dried, breathing became erratic, heartbeats grew weaker and quieter. He couldn't scream, couldn't move. The world shrank to the sound of wheels, to the distant bright light of the locomotive, to the final thought, "I don't want to die." And at that moment the bushes beside the tracks rustled. First silently, then with a crack, and suddenly out from them like a whirlwind, Storm burst forth, bright, shining, unstoppable. She didn't halt, rushing straight to the boy, rising on her hind legs, full of fury and fear. Her hooves straddled the tracks, nostrils flared. She struck the straps with her head, her teeth sought their fastening. She pulled, jerked, tore apart the knots. One strap yielded, but the second proved tougher. The train was already so close that its light and wind struck the boy's face. Storm roared with effort, strength, and determination. Finally, with one last exertion, she yanked the strap upwards. A sharp crack, sparks, and the wheelchair, tilting, slipped from the rails. Just a moment later, the train thundered past, drowning out everything around. The wind of its speed flattened the grass, muffled sounds, but the boy was off the tracks. The wheelchair toppled to the side, and he rolled onto the ground himself. Storm stood over him, trembling all over. She gently nudged his face with her muzzle, as if asking, "Are you alive?" The boy lightly but clearly exhaled, "Storm." It was all he could say, but it was enough for the horse. She stayed beside him, guarding him. From the trees where the man had earlier hidden, hurried footsteps could be heard. He burst onto the clearing with a face filled not with remorse, but with fear. He had hoped everything would go unnoticed, but what he saw robbed him of speech. The horse stood over the boy, a protector. Her chest heaved from the run. Her eyes gleamed. Nearby, broken straps, the wheelchair toppled on its side. The boy barely alive. His breathing was faint, but steady. Suddenly, a cry rang out. Behind, the sound of vehicles approached. People ran into the field. The old caretaker who witnessed the horse's escape had called the police, convinced something terrible had happened. Neighbors came too, hearing the strange neighing. Police and medical staff rushed to the scene, witnessing a sight that took everyone's breath away. "What happened here?" asked the officer, running up. "Who did this?" And the boy, forgetting himself in a faint whisper, pointed directly at the man who had intended to end his life. "Dad tied me." Everyone froze. Officers immediately apprehended him. He started to protest, shouting incoherent words, but everything was clear. The boy narrowly escaped death, and it was the horse who saved him. Storm came closer and rested her head on the boy's shoulder. She didn't waver, even when the medics took the child to the stretcher. Her eyes were calm and full of strength. She knew she had fulfilled her purpose. That day, the story of the horse who saved a boy spread across the country. But no one knew the most important thing. It was not just a story of salvation. It was a tale of love, devotion, and true miracles. Days passed. The story of the boy and the horse who saved his life swept through the village and neighboring towns. Newspapers wrote about the animal's heroism, and television showed a report on how Storm, the Wonder Horse, managed to come to the rescue and avert a tragedy. Storm was given medals, and local authorities expressed their admiration. But for the boy, this story looked different. He sat in his room, gazing out the window at horizons where the last streak of daylight disappeared. The boy still couldn't believe he was alive. The fear and horror of that night wouldn't leave him. In his thoughts appeared the images of the tracks he had narrowly avoided and, of course, Storm, the faithful and mighty horse who stayed by his side against all odds. One morning, as he sat by the window, the old caretaker approached him. He was the first to notice Storm's disappearance from the stable and her swift dash towards the tracks. He quietly came with a smile, gently patting the boy's head, as he always did with the animals on the farm. "You're still getting used to this life?" he asked softly. The boy nodded, unable yet to express his gratitude in words. "You know, Storm didn't just save you," he continued. "She felt it. Everything that happens with people is no secret to her. She saw something important in you. She was saving not just a friend, but you, because you are special." The boy looked into his eyes, and his heart tightened with a strange feeling, a feeling of gratitude but also guilt. He was just a child, but he couldn't understand why his life had become so significant to Storm, why the horse had strived to protect him. At that moment, almost magically, Storm entered the room. The horse stood at the door, gently neighing, looking at the boy as if at an old friend. In her gaze he could read, "You live, you matter. You will cope, and I will be here." The boy stood up, approached her, wrapped his arms around her warm neck, feeling the peace she brought with her. The world became a bit easier. "You're my hero," he murmured. "You saved me." And Storm leaned against him, showing that she would always be there, ready to protect him at any moment. This horse became his loyal friend. And the boy, despite the suffering he endured, now knew that miracles existed in the world. And this miracle was found in the strength, devotion, and love of the unseen but real. Months passed, and the boy's life significantly changed. He was no longer the frightened and lonely child in a wheelchair. At first, these were small steps: morning strolls in the yard with Storm, then sessions with doctors inspired by his story who volunteered to help him. It turned out that with proper therapy and care, the boy had a chance to partially regain mobility. And all of this became possible due to the attention his story attracted. People began to support him, some with finances, some morally, and others just with words of encouragement. But the most important support remained beside him, the loyal horse, sensitive and strong. Meanwhile, the trial against his father continued. In the village, no one hid anymore how cruel he truly was. Witnesses who had previously remained silent now openly talked about his cruel treatment of his son, about the humiliation and isolation. The court proceedings became a symbol of the fight for justice. On the day of sentencing, the boy sat in court, clutching a small horse figurine, a gift he received during rehabilitation. Beside him stood Storm. She was allowed into the courtroom. The judge, moved by this story, permitted it as a mark of respect for the heroic horse. His father stood in cuffs, pale, avoiding his son's gaze. The judge read the sentence: prolonged imprisonment for attempted murder, cruel treatment of a child, and trying to stage an accident. When the gavel fell, the boy didn't cry. He simply exhaled and looked at Storm. The horse, sensing his relief, softly nudged him with her muzzle. It was a moment of closing an old chapter and beginning a new life where he once again had the chance to find happiness. After the session, reporters rushed to the boy, but he said only one thing: "This isn't my story. It's Storm's story, who taught me how to live." His tale of salvation spread across the country, inspiring many. The boy, now confident with Storm by his side, began a new life, one filled not just with trials, but also love, friendship, and hope for the future. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.